Welcome to the Dr. Dad's podcast, where a naturopath and chiropractor come together each week to share lifestyle medicine, health advice, and inspiring interviews with some of the top experts in health and wellness, bringing you the latest in nutrition, exercise, ancient healing, toxins and detox, your microbiome, mindset, hormones, brain, and much more. Stay tuned. We're going to teach you how to experience growth daily.
Everybody, this is Dr. Wardy. Dr. Nicholas, what's happening, man?
It's another day in paradise, brother. How are you doing?
I'm solid, man. I'm solid. We're starting to reopen back here in El Paso quite a bit, and there's some normalcy back in life, so things are good, man.
It's good.
So I'm excited today. We've been talking about getting this guy on for a while, and we locked it down finally. So today we have Dr. Michael Kessler on. And real quick, before I ask him to come hang out with us, I'm going to give a little bio about him. So Michael Kessler is a DC, CCSP, and a nutrition therapeutic practitioner. I think I said that right.
Yeah, good enough.
Yeah, there we go. He has 35 years of clinical practice with a primary focus on nutritional and functional medicine, and he's highly experienced in integration of advanced healing methods, systems, and devices. He's the author of 4 books: The 8-Day Detox Breakthrough, The New Medicine Cure, Doctor's Home Remedies That Work, and New Breakthroughs in Natural Pain Healing. And he's also written articles on a monthly basis for several years for a health newsletter for Lombardi Publishing. He teaches a lot of workshops for biotics research, nutra-energetic systems, and has lectured for the Academy of Complementary and Integrative Medicine, as well as curing the Incurables Conference. He's done dual workshops with Dr. Becchetti, I believe I'm saying that right, for the Academy of Complementary and Integrative Medicine. And he now teaches individual practitioners with Dr. Becchetti how they can integrate a variety of modalities into their practices to help localize the core imbalances that are contributing to their patients' health problems. Doc, thanks for coming, man. Thanks for coming on, and I'm glad we finally got you on today.
Well, I really appreciate you guys asking me. It's great to be here. And we have a little history because you have one of my heart rate variability devices. You have the HeartQuest, right?
And I love it, man. I love it. And you just keep adding and improving it. So
Just wait. We'll talk about it today. Some of the things, it's going to be a whole new spaceship for you.
Awesome, man. So real quick, before we get into the nitty-gritty of the HeartQuest, because I really want to talk about the system, just for our listeners and for anybody who doesn't understand what heart rate variability is and how we can use this tool, can you just kind of get into some of that and how important using a tool like this is and how you use it?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I've got to give you a little bit of history, because not all heart rate variability systems are the same. A lot of the things that people wear on their watch and buy at the store and stuff, those are toys. This is really a functional evaluation, so it's more than just heart rate variability. And it was developed originally in Russia for this, actually really interesting, not just to measure submariners. They use it to track their health under the ocean there, but they use it quite heavily on the space station. And that's really apropos for today with the SpaceX, right? They've been using it there. They've been monitoring people doing spacewalks, how their sleep pattern, all sorts of things. So that's where it came from.
So, I mean, I'm sure listeners are thinking, like, we can get all that data to monitor these people just from their heart rate variability, right?
So here's the deal. There's 2 major components to measuring the EKG. You know, like most people see the EKG, they see the R waves, these little systolic peaks, they look at that, and that's kind of what people think about when they think of an EKG. What heart rate variability does is it measures the space or the time between each of those R waves. It's called the time domain. And why would they do that? Because it's a reflection of the all-encompassing autonomic nervous system, which we could call the automatic nervous system, right? It's the one that regulates all our body's functions, like 95, 96% of our body's organs, glands, and vessels without us thinking about it. So, oh God, I forgot to breathe today. I forgot, you don't have to think about it. The body does that. And there are 2 branches that we're measuring. Actually, we're going to talk about 3, but 2 branches that everybody knows about is the fight or flight system, the sympathetic nervous system. So that's the one that when, IRS is coming to visit you, Whether you got your mother-in-law who's supposed to stay for 2 days and decides she's going to stay for a year, whatever it is that gets your
Or
goal.
you're freaking out about COVID, right? Like most people right now.
That's right.
Right?
So whatever it is, your body's going to react. And it's going to go into survival mode. And that survival mode is going to dictate certain physiology. So when you're in sympathetic dominant, your heart rate's going to go up, your blood pressure is going to go up, you're going to start pumping glucose into your bloodstream so you can have the fuel to run and escape, and all these things, digestion, all the things that you don't need to survive shut down. You don't need to do liver detoxification. You don't need to do digestion. That's why you don't want to be having arguments at the dinner table when because you go into sympathetic mode, it shuts down your digestion. So that's the one side of the equation. Now you just, you've gone through a stressful situation. You survived. Now the body has to go back and regenerate and heal. That's your parasympathetic side. Rest and digest, they call it, right? And so that also has a big factor there because it also is involved in something called the anti-inflammatory pathway, the cholinergic anti-inflammatory pathway to reduce inflammation, which today in science, they're taking advantage of that by trying to stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system in autoimmune cases to reduce this inflammatory cytokine storm. So it's got more interesting things that the parasympathetic does. And we'll talk about that maybe in a little bit. But so you got these two branches, they got to be able to be flexible and go back and forth. So what happens if it doesn't go back and forth and you're stuck in one realm or the other? That can't be good, because then you've lost your adaptive capability to be able to handle situations where you need to be able to bounce and dance back and forth between the two systems. It's a big deal. So if you're in sympathetic mode and you're stuck in sympathetic mode, which a lot of people today are, because it takes me back to this book by Robert Sapolsky. You ever seen that? Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers?
No. Tell me.
This guy's an amazing researcher. But basically, zebra gets chased by a lion. It survives, say. It doesn't sit around and say, oh, God, I wonder if I could next time, I wonder if that lion's around the corner. I wonder if I could run faster than my other zebras. I wonder if my stripes on my back stand out a little too much and the lion can see me. I mean, on and on, and that's what we do, right? That's what people do. They things that haven't even happened yet. We perceive these things, and we're stressed all the time. We're only supposed to be stressed for a short period of time, and then not producing all these stress hormones continuously. And in this day and age with the COVID-19, that's not a good thing. And why is that not a good thing? Because what are the things when you're producing lots of cortisol, which is one of your stress hormones? One of the things that drops is your secretory IgA that lines your mucous membranes and protects you from antigens, which is the virus, penetrating, right? That's one thing. Not to mention, we can go on and on and on about long-term stress and how it affects the whole physiology, right? And so basically, in the other side of the equation is the parasympathetic nervous system. And everybody talks about, well, God, we want to have a big, let me explain visually for the audience here. We have a pie on the heart rate variability. The pie shows the percentage in color of your sympathetic nervous system, which is in yellow, and how much percent you have. The green part on the pie is your parasympathetic. We haven't talked about the red yet, which I will. And that's another regulatory system. And so you can see this pie. And you can see if yellow is kind of the predominant thing, that's your fight or flight. You're in sympathetic dominant, and you don't want to do that either, because that's gonna you're gonna be producing stress hormones, and that again lowers your immune system, causes all sorts of sarcopenia where you lose muscle mass and inflammation, and we go on and on and all the things that are involved with that. But you don't want to be in parasympathetic dominant either. But everybody who's got these little toy heart rate variability systems goes, well, I want to be in parasympathetic dominant. That's supposed to be really good, right? But it can be if you're a young athlete, and that's where you want to be. But if you look at another number that we have on the machine, it's called vital force, right? You've seen the vital force. And you got this big green part of the pie, and you got the low vital force. Adrenal exhaustion. Okay, you're pooped. So
out of reserves.
You're out of reserves. I say, unfortunately, I just checked myself, and that's where I am. So there's a third part. The third part of this whole pie is called neurohormonal regulation. It's basically your limbic system and your HPA axis. Okay, and you need to be able to regulate your endocrine system. You know that has to do with getting the hormones from the HPA axis, the hypothalamus, right? You need to get that into the bloodstream, and then to get to regulate thyroid and adrenals and all these things. And then it builds up, these hormones build up, and then it's kind of like a thermostat. It goes back up to the hypothalamus and says, hey, man, we got enough here. Let's turn the thermostat down. We don't need to produce more of this, right? It's regulating like that. But if that's the predominant one, I call that snail mail versus the autonomic nervous system, which is high-speed, fast internet, right? And so when that builds up, you're going to use up a lot of your metabolic energy. The other thing about the red is we find that as we age, we start to shut down more of our autonomic nervous system, the fast speed guy, and we start to go increase the slower guy, we call it very low frequency range. And I'm going to explain that in a minute too. Excuse me. So what happens is if you're in VLF, there's a lot of research on VLF, very low frequency, this red part of the pie. It's related to the renin-angiotensin system. So a lot of these people have higher blood pressure, a lot of metabolic issues. They can also have psycho-emotional issues if it's in a young person in that range. Now, we've broken this down. I'm gonna go into this a little bit, but we've broken it down even further, which you don't have yet. You've got those 3 regulatory systems. Mm-hmm. And before I go on, let me tell you, those 3 regulatory systems, we talked about the time domain and how we can measure from one contraction of the heart to the next, right? And that gives us, and that's broken down into all sorts of, in mainstream medicine, all sorts of statistical numbers that give us, information. Like there's one number in there called the SDNN. You familiar with that? The standard deviation of normal to normal beats. For your audience, that's an indice that's used pretty heavily in heart rate variability to tell us how well you can handle an emergency. Okay. And in the mainstream medicine, they've also used it to track people with cancer and things like that. And when it drops below a certain number, that person can't adapt anymore, right? And they've lost that ability, and the prognosis isn't good. That's another number. So these are all numbers that have to do with the time domain, measuring the space between one R wave contraction and the next. But what I love is the spectral analysis. So we could break that EKG down into its individual frequency band components. Break it down by something called fast Fourier transfer. Basically, it breaks it down into low frequency, high frequency, and very low frequency. And that's what the pie is. The pie is showing us the percentage of each of these regulatory systems from the frequency domain. Now, this is where it gets real interesting, because from the frequency domain, we can break that down into the actual meridians in Chinese medicine. We know that certain meridians are in the low frequency, high frequency, and very low frequency. The Russians worked that out, but we've taken it even further. We can also see from the 5,000-year-old Ayurvedic medicine what each of those frequency ranges mean. And now we're breaking it down into individual functional medicine now. So you don't have to remember that they have all sorts of strange names for all these, what they call doshas. These constitutional types that people have. And so when you know a constitutional type, let me backtrack. So you're looking at those frequencies, right? The red, the green, and the yellow in the pie, right? So now we're breaking it down even into, so I could take, say, for example, that very low frequency, and now I'm breaking it into 5s, which represent all these, what they call subdoshas in Ayurvedic medicine, that tell us very specific physiology. So when we look at the physiology now, and we can see that this person has a high range in a particular area, this is going to tell you the answers anyway, the way we're setting it up. And then you can look at the meridians, and that's probably we're going to have it set up where it tells you which meridian is deficient or excess. You'll be able to tell that person probably has something going on with maybe in the range of esophageal reflux, or they can't produce enough hydrochloric acid. You'll be able to or they have more things going on in the brain region. Look there. So it's going to give you clues and kind of like a guide with questionnaires. So you can have your symptoms, suggested lab tests, because I do a lot of genetic work. I do a ton of genetic work. And all these things will combine for you as a physician to make your life easier. And so this is where this is headed. I don't know how I shot over to this direction, but it's going to be pretty amazing, really.
Well, I love how the system has both sides. When I remember when I first saw the system with you, you're like, yeah, we got the Western data, and then we got it shown in like more of the Eastern medicine, and you can pull up like all that data and really just kind of see it from very different places, from a functional approach, like you're saying. And it's such an easy thing to do, right? Like you just hook up the patient. It takes what, like 5 minutes, 300 heartbeats, and then you get this amazing amount of data that really gives you a roadmap for that patient of what the state of their nervous system is, like you're speaking to earlier, but then also just overall function, right? Like where are they at when they're coming into you? Are they in a state that they're going to be able to heal when you start rolling some stuff out, or where are we going to have to work on all these things? And I got to tell you, man, I think I've had your system for a little over 5 years. I want to say I was thinking about that today, and I love it, man. And like I said, you're constantly updating it and just making it better and better and expanding on it. But my patients love this, man. I mean, it's neat to be able to sit down in front of your patient and show them, this is why you're feeling the way you're feeling, because a lot of my patients that by the time they make it into me, they've been told they're crazy by their doctors, like, oh, there's nothing wrong with you, and it's all in your head or whatever. But then this, I mean, there's 1,000 words when you open up the results when you run a scan on somebody. And I do want to get into the brain piece for sure on the emotional end, like you were speaking to earlier, because that's actually one of the bigger ways that I use it. You said something earlier. You said some people it's more, the mental emotional piece, and you're going to have to dive in there. And that brain screen that you have on there is huge for having that conversation with somebody on the brainwave activity and things like that.
That's right. That's right. So a lot of times I'll see somebody, and I'm sure you could see the same thing. You'll see that they're sympathetic dominant. And then you go to the brain waves. We have an area that looks at the brain waves, and you'll see that they have high beta, for example. Everything's flat, and you get to the beta area, and everything's peaked. That's usually where the thoughts, the brain is going, the mind is going over and over and over, or they have anxiety. So it gives you a big clue to enter into that area for sure.
Mm-hmm. And it's crazy because, like, I'll get some of these patients to do, let's say, like a meditation or breathing practice, right? And they'll start implementing that in their lifestyle. And then we'll get them to come back in and start doing some scans. And you see this massive shift in the brainwave activity that they're having. And I'm sure you're going to get into it, but can you talk about the breath? You guys have a custom breath work part that it literally is, it's not cookie cutter, right? Like it's based off the scan.
It's based on their heart rate, their individual heart rate, and it tries to bring them into the zone. The Russians did a lot of work with looking at, the guys who worked on this machine during the Cold War really were mathematicians. Russia has a lot of these really smart mathematicians. They were involved in this project to make this technology, and they were looking at nature, and they looked at something called fractal neural dynamic coding, which is basically they looked at the EKG and the QRST wave that we see on the EKG, and they were looking at almost like Morse code. They were able to get this kind of scoring system, and they were able mathematically to tell when somebody was going out of range with nature. It's real wild stuff, right? And then when you're going outside that realm, that's where your health is going to decline. You're moving further away from nature. One of the things I was going to tell you about, which is also, I mean, my mind is going. You're kind of stimulating different things, right? But there's a project in Palo Alto, California. It's called the Palo Alto Longevity Project. Have you heard of that or no?
No, I haven't.
So this is $1 million prize for longevity and to extend life, and there's scientists all over the world. And the main system that they're using for everybody in this contest is heart rate variability. because it gives them a global look at all systems, you know, and how whatever therapy they're going to use is going to respond, right? And they talk a lot about homeostatic capacity. What that means is we're young, we have high blood pressure, or our immune, you know, or which is a good one, or blood sugar. Blood sugar is another good one. And if you go outside that range, you have the capacity when you're young to self-correct. But when we get older, we lose our ability to self-correct. And the heart rate variability, which we're talking about here, that has all these indices that we're looking at, you're looking at every day, gives us a clue about if that person is able to self-correct. You know, and a lot of doctors use it because they wanted to check the validity of their therapies too, besides being able to track and manage their patients and show them that, yeah, what I'm doing is helping you improve your health. But also, for me, I have all these toys. I got right here, I got an autonomic, which is a pulse magnetic field therapy. I have laser therapies. I got auricular therapy here. You know, I mean, you name it, we got it. And I was always curious because a lot of times people don't feel anything, right? Do these things work? Do they change, you know, the physiology? So,
Well, I love it that you brought it there, man, because, you know, one of the big things I'm constantly educating people about is the tone of your nervous system, like you were speaking to earlier, has the biggest impact on whether your body's going to run properly, right? Is that physiology doing what it's supposed to do in that time and place? And, you know, you were speaking to a little bit of this, we lose this flexibility, right? I think me and Nick, we termed it like ANS, what did we say? ANS flexibility, right? Like that's basically
right.
what we termed it, is like when you lose that flexibility of the autonomic nervous system, then we're going to start to have some trouble there. And like you're saying, on the extreme end, you have people that are like autoimmune who are basically just stuck. They're like almost just stuck in this sympathetic state. I call it neural fatigue, where the hypothalamus is done. I mean, their nervous system is just in this massive fatigue, and it can't switch gears. It's just gotten stuck. And I do a lot of NIS work now, and that's had massive improvements for my patients and their ability to get out of that state.
Tell me about that. What is it, NIS?
NIS, neurological integration. So when we map the brain using NIS, a lot of times we find that the vagus nerve, for example, is completely blown. There's just no signaling. And we talk about how this plays like a switchboard, right? Yeah. So when that vagal nerve tone is showing up almost completely diminished, once we actually get that back on the table, the person will switch from that sympathetic like defense mode, and they'll literally start to almost pass out on the table, and they'll tell us like, oh, I'm getting crazy tired, because we're getting them switched back over to that parasympathetic tone. And then it's amazing to see the shift after that, because I tell them like, you're not even in healing mode when you came in. That's why you feel so bad. You've been in this like fight or flight defense mode for months. You're finally coming in, and we're going to get you back and just get that tone switched over. And then from there, we can actually start making some progress, because the tone wasn't even there for your body to actually heal and repair. So it's massive. And what a great visual tool, right? To be able to see this in real time when these people walk in, because it's like, it's not just for the doctor. I mean, it helps us as doctors because it's a great tool, but the patient can see it. And then you can do these subsequent scans and stuff.
Yeah, that's the main thing. And it looks like you're using it, you're maximizing the use of that the way it should be used. You know, absolutely. You're doing a great job there. And, you know, the doctors call me up and they say, well, what do I need to do to change this thing? I said, well, why'd you go to school those years? You got to incorporate everything. You got to do the psycho-emotional work. You got to make sure that gut is working. You got to make sure, you know, everything that we've learned has to be utilized.
Absolutely.
You know, and, you know, right now, my practice has switched because, you know, not just the COVID, but I've been doing remote testing right now. So people send me their, you know, I send them actually their lab stuff and their genetic stuff and do all that kind of distance. And then I make a movie for them. I make movies for all my patients to educate them, because I feel education is really important to keep them on track and understand why I want them to do all the things they want to do. But that's why I've been working really heavily on having a remote system for you guys, because with not just because of the COVID, but if you have somebody and you're tracking them from a distance and you tell them, look, I want you off of gluten. They say, I don't really think I got a problem with gluten. You put the little halter on them. You say, okay, go out and eat some gluten and let's see what it looks like. So we're going to go into a new realm where you're going to be able to see things in real time. And I've done this because remember before I was working on the patch, but I didn't like the patch because I was getting a lot of artifacts and people were moving around. It wasn't stable. But I did do some work with that before we creating the one we're creating now. And so this one gal goes to the Cheesecake Factory with us, and she didn't eat the healthy food that we eat. She ate some really bad, cheesecake and all this stuff, right? And you saw instantly how bad that heart rate variability looks. Everything went downhill very quickly. So you're going to have that ability to be able to see in real time what's going on with your patients as you put them on different programs. Or maybe they can't sleep at night. You see, wow, well, I can see why you can't sleep. You're completely in sympathetic dominant. So not only are we setting it up to do that, but we're also setting it up where it's going to automatically track. When you do somebody, you're taking a snapshot, right? But the computer, if you're doing them every month, will keep track of that and then give you their constitutional type. What is their predominant pattern? So I think that's going to be really valuable. What do you think on that one?
Oh, that's exciting, man. I mean, you and me and talked briefly about this, the power in being able to track somebody and when they're eating or like you're saying, sleeping or just some of these basic things to be able to watch the physiology to see what's happening with them, right? Or even from the emotional mental piece. So Nick, I'm going to let you, I know you want to talk, right? I'm sorry. You're just
this is
back
great.
there. Yeah.
I'm just thinking about this through the lens of anyone listening who doesn't quite know what HRV is all about. And so I think that the way the conversation has been going has been really, really helpful. And I just want to kind of anchor it back into someone's health and help them understand, you referred to those three different states, the sympathetic dominant state or sympathetic, parasympathetic, and then this third one, which is that vitality, which might reflect inflammatory mechanisms and all sorts of other things that, degenerate as we get older. So that's amazing. I mean, that's amazing information. How do we, when I think of some of the stuff that I play with, heart math, and that we can teach people in real time how to change their breath patterns, to change their heart rate variability scores and that kind of thing. But I like where you're going with this baseline testing that people can do at home so they can track this data over time. That's hugely valuable. So how much, again, going back to heart math, you can change someone's heart rate variability just with doing the breathing. How do you, once people know they can do that and you're testing them, how do you create that objectivity a little bit more so you can see some of the baseline readings? Yeah, well, let me go back. Okay. So let's say the person is predominantly in the red zone. Okay, they're aging, they're in what we call very low frequency range. In Ayurvedic medicine, that would be somebody who's a vata, very dry inside, very cold. They're in their head all the time. They can't get out of their head. Everything's kind of, you think of it as air up in the head, and they're kind of wired, right? And they need routine. Those are the people that, if they don't have a routine, they don't exercise at a certain time, they don't eat at a certain time, it throws them completely off balance. So just having that information for them and say, look, for your system, and they always agree with, they'll agree with you. They'll say, hey, this is me. I said, that's right. So I want you to do these tasks. I want you to have a schedule, and I want you to follow that. And then we're going to go back and check the heart rate variability system, like you're talking about, and see that it's making those changes. And here's, by the way, your breathing program, So and again, it's going to get much more specific depending on some of the new things we're putting in there to be able to give people the right information of what they need to do to change their specific pattern.
I don't know if that answered anything.
Yeah, no, it does, because it just anchors in that the people have to do work, and this could be used as that objective tool, and things will transform over time, and there's ways to track that. And then my next question sort of follows in line with that. I mean, you speak to constitutions. Constitutions are thought to be things that you're kind of stuck with. Kind of like genetics, like this is who you are. But can you talk about the epigenetic component to shifting expression of constitution?
Yeah. Probably the easiest way to do that, because I do a lot of genetics, and it's not common, where I look at one gene. I was trained by a guy named Bob Miller. I don't know if you know who that is, but his system is just light years ahead of anything out there. It looks at patterns. And sorry. Of course, let me get that out of there for you, one of my colleagues. But so when I do the genetics, we tell the person, these are potentials, okay? But so in my software, I have their symptoms. God, okay, great. We have a symptom survey that goes into the computer, and their labs, like the urine organic acid test goes in there, and it looks at the genes, the symptoms, and the labs. And it weighs it, so I can see, red, and red. The symptoms are red. The genetics in this particular area, say for a Fenton reaction, which is where iron gets oxidized and creates these nasty hydroxyl radicals. Yeah. So you're looking at all this stuff. You don't just look at the genes. You got to look at the whole situation. And it's really a question of epigenetics. Their lifestyle is kind of like the genetics is the gun, and the lifestyle pulls the trigger, to set it all in motion, right? And so you got to hit it from both sides. And I think that the main thing, that when you're looking at the heart rate variability system, you're getting people, because to hold that pattern, to change the pattern, it's all about epigenetics and lifestyle. So if they're going to eat crummy, they're going to have crummy heart rate variability. If they can't get out of that stress mode, they're going to have crummy heart rate variability. It's a reflection of everything that you're doing in your life.
Yeah, that's such powerful information for people. And the fact that you can actually monitor that in real time, you can track it after you eat a crappy meal or a food trigger, what have you. I mean, that's a direct inflammatory response that's being picked up. I remember measuring one of my, I guess maybe my sickest patients. He was probably in his early 80s, chronic cardiovascular disease, kidney issues and whatnot. When we measured his heart rate variability, his R waves were like, it almost looked like a flat line. Like there was such little variability between them. And that's an extreme case of dysfunction, because when you check most younger people, there's a nice high degree of variation.
Right.
So can you speak a little more to the R wave component and maybe some different illnesses where you might see different changes, and then what's to be expected over time?
Yeah. So heart rate variability is supposed to look at normal to normal beats, right? But as you know, and I know, people are coming in with all sorts of PVCs and arrhythmias and all these things. And sometimes you'll even see, so you got the R wave, the big peak, and right next to it, you got the T wave. And sometimes the T wave is supposed to be, about a third of the way up. And so you'll see all these little nuances. And sometimes they don't have enough minerals, right? Sometimes it's giving you a clue about mineralization. Sometimes it's giving you a clue, like one I just had this week, the R wave was so small. And sometimes that's because if you look at the other things that we do, their total power might have been really low too. The total power, that's in the meridian section. We need to change that because it's such an important item. And it gives you a clue about mitochondrial energy. And so they don't have enough juice. And they can see that there. And you need to boost their mitochondria. So there's a lot of little nuances there. And a lot of times when I go to these shows, I used to go to the shows and test, and I found a lot of doctors with pretty serious heart situation thing. They have really bad EKG. And you see that. Remember, you see the pink lines, and you'll see that all the way through. And some of them weren't even aware that they had these problems, and they'd go get checked with the cardiologist, and they had some major problems. So it's also a very good screening tool for that as well. So I don't know if that answers your question. It's very complex when you're looking at that aspect. The one who knows more about that, honestly, than me is my partner, Dr. Karamov, who's co-founder with us here, and he's an anesthesiologist, so he's used to looking at abnormal EKGs all the time. And a lot of times I'll run it by him. And you guys are always welcome to run it by him as well, all the people that have the HeartQuest, because sometimes you'll see some really unusual patterns there, right, guys?
Well, it's so helpful to hear that because, like you said, there's a lot of funny little gadgets. The Oura Ring measures heart rate variability. You know, there's the heart math, super simplistic. I mean, there's so many different, you know, quirky little tools that give you snippets of information, but you're really speaking to, like, this is giving you a much broader picture of what's possible with technology like this. So jump in, David.
Well, no,
Before you go, can I just mention one more thing to you?
Yeah, go ahead, Doc.
The difference, here's another big difference between these toys. Most of the toys are looking at LF to HF ratio, low frequency, high frequency, the sympathetic to parasympathetic. The part of the pie, remember the yellow and green part of the pie. You can have a perfect ratio between the sympathetic and parasympathetic, and you go, wow, this is great, because they don't have the VLF. And they could be, maybe they have a balanced LF to HF, sympathetic to parasympathetic, but the majority of that pie is VLF, right? And so it's not really giving you an accurate indication of what's going on. Okay. Yeah. So that's another good example. And we see that a lot in the, you know, when you get on the internet, people are talking about the two ratios there. It's just giving you a false sense of what can be going on.
Well, and the depth in which the HeartQuest, like you're speaking to, Doc, I mean, like Nick, you haven't had it in front of you, and like I told you, I was going to bring it to the retreat. I should have brought it that way. You could have played with it a little bit. Right. But you get, like Doc's saying, in each of these screens, with some of these numbers that we're able to get in the data we're getting, we're getting a lot of detail and insight into what's really going on. And like you were speaking to earlier with the total power, for example, right? Yeah. And you're saying mitochondria. And this is interesting because I just ran my HRV this week. It'd been a while and I hadn't done it. I had run it on the other computer, but I noticed that yesterday when I ran it. So last year I had been training all year long for a Spartan race, and I had intense amount of training, right? And supplementation. I mean, all these things just so that I could do these races. And my total power was in the 8,000s when I was training for that. And this year I haven't been training for anything. I mean, I'm still active. I go bike riding with my little boy, and, you know, we go on hikes and walks and stuff, but nowhere close to last year, right? And I'm in the 4,000s right now. So it but I mean, just goes to show you, though, like when you're doing things and you're targeting things, how much that total power can go up, you know, versus someone who's changing. I changed my lifestyle. My lifestyle is different right now, and you just see that shift. But what a neat way, right? I mean, that's just showing you guys an example of how you actually can see that in real time, and it's trending. So it's a magnificent system. I love playing with it all the time. Like I said, my patients love it. And honestly, anybody who's working with the nervous system needs to have one of these in their clinic, because it's giving you this very good in-depth look at what the state of that's looking like and how the body's functioning, like you're saying. So Doc, I have to get into this because this is a fun part for me as well, but you have the biorhythm coherence screen. And then you also have the screen that shows the chakras. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Okay. So, like I said, everything, we have one system. You know, it's not like we have functional medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, Chinese medicine. Everything's integrated. And so, if it's integrated, we should be able to cross from one system to the next. And the Russians were really good at doing that, you know, and so we get a feel for what's going on with the different nerve plexus, the energetic systems of the body, and the meridians. Here's a good way to explain some of this whole thing. So in Chinese medicine, they're checking the pulse, right? They're really good at checking the pulse. Or in Ayurvedic medicine, I don't know if you've ever been diagnosed, but I was diagnosed once by a very famous Vaslad, who's a world famous Ayurvedic guy. He told me everything about my body from measuring the pulse. It's like, what the hell? How did he do that? And you know, So we're doing it directly with the EKG. The way it's set up, we can get that information directly about what's going on at the energetic level, about all these different things. And so there's many ways to use that information, okay? I find that the energetic chakras are very accurate. And if you go into click on the little icon up there where the menu comes down, you can see kind of how that's affecting somebody at that level, psycho-emotionally, right?
And they're right on, man, by the way. Like almost every time when you see where they're diminished, it's like right on. It's awesome.
Yeah, it really is. And so, and the other one is the meridians. And I'll tell you, man, if I see a meridian that just doesn't go away, every time they come in, that thing's stuck. Say it's the stomach meridian. And I go, okay. They fill out the little questionnaire. Okay, maybe they have problems with HCl, not being able to break down their food, or maybe. And you do kinesiology like I do, but I'm not doing that in person anymore. I would test and do the Scott Walker NET, and I go, oh, that's emotional. In life, there's 3 things that affect his love, money, or you. Is it money, job, and his career? To go through it, and it would be an emotional component. So, there's so many avenues to address all these things based on your expertise, and the meridians are real accurate. I had a lung thing going on. The HeartQuest showed that the lung meridian was lit up. It was like excess stuck energy in there, right? In the lung meridian. It shows it, real visual for the patient. And I was on a cruise ship, and the guy put the needles in, did the acupuncture for the lung, and then it changed immediately. We've done this over and over again, but it's just that accurate. So depending on how you want to use that.
Yeah. I'm not an acupuncturist myself, but yeah, like I do kind of glance at the acupuncture screen every once in a while, just because I know those meridians. Like I said, I don't practice it, but I do work with them a little bit with some of the other stuff that I do. But yeah, I mean, it's just neat having those other screens, like I'm saying, on top of, and they're all synergistic, like you're saying.
Yeah. So so you could take, even if you're not trained in those areas like me, I'm not trained in those areas either. Dr. Bicchetti, my wife is, but what we do in the new system, it will calculate all the stuff and look at patterns. So we'll look at the meridians. It will look at the different frequencies of the sympathetic, parasympathetic, and neural hormonal, which is VLF. It'll look at all these patterns, and it's going to guide you to where some of these areas are stuck and may need some help in a much, much more specific way. And you could validate it with questionnaires, and then it may come up and say, these are some lab tests that we want to run. So there's another section on the test looking at the neurotransmitters, right?
Mm-hmm.
So say you see GABA is low, right? Then you got the questionnaire that pops up, the little GABA questionnaire. It says, okay, that's showing that it's low. Okay, so we got 2 indices there. And here's some lab tests that you can run. For me, I run the genetics again, so I can see that they have maybe the GAD gene. They're not converting their glutamate to GABA. Like I just had one of those guys. I just had a case like that. They have a lot of anxiety. Plus, they have a lot of other genes on top of it. So I want to put some gene suggestions, because now every company out there, you see it, right? I mean, all the different nutraceutical companies have their genetic programs, right? So I think I want to, since I do a lot of that work, I want to put that in there too, just to give you a heads up that these are some areas where they have these constitutional weaknesses again we were talking about.
Oh, that would be great. Nicholas?
Yeah, I think that's so helpful, because there's a level of responsibility that people become aware of when they see this. And if it is more of a VLF problem, then there's reason to dive deeper and find out where that pathology or the predispositions are sitting. And it also helps to validate the doctor supporting the patient, because again, it gives you an area to drive in more information and get to the bottom of something. So I love what I'm hearing. I'm curious. So a doctor wants to bring this into their practice. What does the hardware look like? What's the cost? Like what are some of the breakdown for people that would be interested in bringing this into their practice?
Yeah, let me pull one up. It comes in a little box like this, so they can carry it wherever they go. And it's got little, the Russians aren't really have a lot of aesthetics in there. The way they do it looks like jumper cables, right? This goes on the wrist, right? You just go here and put it on the wrist, right? And it's attached to a little device here. Real simple. And you wet the wrists, you put them on, hit the target, and there you go. It takes 5 minutes. You see the EKG up on the screen, and you got this vast visual look at all these different areas of the body that you can decipher out, how they're doing. So it's very quick. The cost is $5,999. We have the same cost all over the world. The training is now we have we have videos for each screen now. We have a website where we give you a code to get in, and you can watch other videos. And I make myself available for those who want to use me or Dr. Karamov if they got a weird heart case, right? So they can get in there, and we do Skype like we're doing kind of now, and they can share screen. Also, there's a capability in the HeartQuest to export. And they hit the export, it goes directly into my HeartQuest, just like I'm looking at it. And I can evaluate it, because sometimes the docs out there, they may look at a case of somebody who's really not in good shape, and it looks really, really good. And I look at that and I go, no, this guy has lots of arrhythmias, and it makes the heart rate variability look really good. This guy's got a problem here. Right.
Awesome. No, and that helps, man, because you guys, you're very experienced in these things. I've actually met Dr. Karamov as well. I think when I bought the system from you a while back. Right. So, and it's a lot of fun talking to you guys, because you guys can see things in there that we can't see when we look at it all the time.
Well, anytime you want, you call me up, we start to look at things. Here's another good one for you. When you see the stress index, that's one of the top numbers on that first page that tells you how much stress that person's under, really, and how well they could adapt to stress, right? And when that number is really high, a lot of times they have oxidative stress as well. It's the way to look at that.
Awesome. Yeah. See, I learn from you every time, man.
Oh, well, it's vice versa. Last time I saw you, you were teaching me some of the muscle testing techniques that you use.
That's right. We were playing with that. I remember some of the ones you showed me.
You were showing me some of the stuff from, I think that was Brimhall, right?
Yeah.
Right.
I got some other questions in relation to how it's being used in a practice. So you run your initial scan,
right?
You start making recommendations, whether it be blood work or other labs, or et cetera. How often do you typically run a retest for people?
Good question. I do it once a month. Because in the patterns, you can see the patterns really clearly, especially if somebody didn't follow your directions, it'll show up the same pattern.
Right. You didn't do anything.
Yeah, it's happened, Yeah. And so once a month, when you first get it, you want to play with it. You're testing. So I've had a few, I won't mention their name. They're out there on the internet, and they're pretty famous, and they're a little neurotic, and they'll test themselves. They'll brush their teeth. I want to see what that did. I'm gonna shave. What did that do? I've had a few pretty neurotic people. Right. They send me 150 tests or something, and then I send it to Job Dot. I say, Job Dot, here it is.
Yeah, I think like any test, you try to set up as much of a control environment as possible. Get yourself relaxed or whatever, have a similar situation, whether it be someone coming to a doctor's office or whatnot. So yeah, you're retesting once a month. And then for a practitioner, on the practitioner side, let's say that they're going to implement this into their practice. So they usually have that as part of their visit fee, or are they usually charging separately for the diagnostic aspect? And what does that look like?
All the above, depending on the practitioner. Yeah. So I would charge. I've gone through different phases, but so I was charging I think it was about 150 or something for the first one. And then when they come in the following month, I can't remember, was it $100 or whatever it was? So it depends on the practitioner, and some of them charge a lot less. It varies around some people that's part of their whole office visit. It's just different for everybody.
Yeah.
We don't tell them which way to do that. But all the practitioners out there, just like Dr. Wardy was saying, they love it. They just love it because their patients love it. And Dr. Wardy, what is the main thing that patients look at? They want to know what their biological age is.
Oh yeah, we haven't talked about that. That's a great screen. So he's got a screen on their biological age, and it literally shows you whether you're in a state of anti-aging or if you're aging faster than your biological age. And it's crazy, man. Like that's like he's saying, that's the one thing that they will pick up on during that consult. And on the next one, they're like, "Can I see the biological age? Is it in the negative yet?"
And they get bummed out, man.
They do. They do. So real quick, Doc, on that note, since we're talking about, the costs and stuff, real quick for the listeners, kind of give them an idea of like, if you compare like sending somebody just in for blood work, which is also a point in time test, and something like an HRV, give me like the weight of the data there if you had to take those two of what you're able to get from the HRV. Because, to someone just hearing like, you're going to get all this from my heart rate, and I think after listening today, they're realizing, wow, there's a whole lot more there than just meets the eye, right, of what you're thinking just because my heart's beating. I mean, there's such value in that. There's a massive amount of value in this kind of test is kind of what I wanted you to speak about. Well,
for me, because I do lab work, it takes time to get the lab back. And the lab, if you're doing a lot of lab, it gets very costly. So for practitioners, depending on what's going on with the patient and their finances and stuff, you can always do heart rate variability, and you get the data immediately, right away. And they're kind of apples and oranges anyway. The heart rate variability is the main thing here. Here's the example: if you have a toxic load, which everybody does, everybody mostly has a psycho-emotional load, right? And a lot of people come in our clinics have a structural load because they're coming into the chiropractic clinic. They have this downward force pushing down on them. And when those stressors become greater than their body's ability to adapt anymore, they end up with signs and symptoms, which brought them into your office in the first place. What do most people do? They take medications, and then they end up having that whole situation because they never addressed the cause. Degeneration ensues, and things go downhill. And so when we look at heart rate variability, we can kind of see and get a visual on how all those things are affecting them. You're not going to see that in the red blood, looking at a regular blood test, right? You're looking at the totality of their life and how that's affecting them. I don't know if that made any sense.
Oh, that was perfect.
Yeah, I love that you said that, because one of the things that we talk about a lot too on this show is just creating the optimal cellular environment. And it's really hard to create the optimal cellular environment so your body can adapt and move into a thriving state instead of a survival state. It's hard to do that when your main mechanism for your nervous system, which is, if we had to talk about hierarchy, it could be some of the highest level of information that's going to allow for this optimal state to arrive. So I think just emphasizing the importance of knowing this about your physiology and understanding a role for this in the healing process is of such great importance. So I love everything I'm hearing. I want to get one for our longevity lab.
Right. Well, here's the deal too. We're the new system. You'll have the system in your office, right, like you do now, and then you also have different systems that are really affordable, by the way, for your patients, so you could track them at a distance. So that's going to be really, really cool. I'm really looking forward to that.
So can you describe that a little bit? What would that be like? Is it something that USB into the computer and it downloads on, like how does that technology work?
We're working on it right now. It's probably going to be where you can access it. They can access, the patient can, have a little hookup, and they'll be able to get it on their phone, on their little Android, and then it should be able to get sent to you. We're working on all that detail. Will it get sent to you so you can see, this is what's going on here, and I want you to stay on this program, and however you're going to manage that. But it's going to be really excited about it, obviously.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah. And nobody has that yet, and at this level. So I think for the practitioners out there, it's just going to be a whole new level of being able to monitor their patients and be able to give good advice for them.
So for practitioners listening, I love this system, and I honestly, like I said earlier, I don't see how you could be a chiropractor and work with the nervous system without it. You know, I mean, if that's something that, I mean, it's a compass, man. You know, like you're talking about the labs right now, this is the perfect thing to run on your patients just to get that compass going, right? So you know where to start looking, where to start addressing their bigger concerns here. And then for the patients that are listening today, if you haven't had this done, you should get it done. I mean, this gives you a lot of insight into where you're at. And if you're having goals or if you're wanting to get improvements in your health, this is a good thing to get that baseline and then make the changes. And then so that you're actually, like Doc was saying earlier, you have something that's monitoring to see in real time is what I'm doing actually working? Is it shifting the needle or things moving? So on both ends, this is a very, very powerful tool. I love mine. I love the updates you're doing, Doc, and I can't wait for the newer stuff where we can track long distance. So Doc, real quick, can you tell the listeners where they can find information on the system, how they can contact you, all that?
Yeah, please. Thank you. So there's only me and Dr. McKetty and Dr. Kermo. So it's not a big company. And now we got the group out of South Africa that's doing the software stuff for us. But they can contact me. They can go to my email. They can go DRM, like Mike, Kessler, KESSLER, at S like Sam, B like boy, C like cat, global.net. They can email me. They can get on the website, which is HRVHQ.com. And I'm old fashioned, you know. They can call me. They call me at 415-646-6112. And if they want a system, we're really sticklers about the education. I want them to be really happy with it. And if they have cases, you got a case, a weird thing, let's look at it together.
Well, and I got to say, this is the type of system where you got to go through the education piece because it just makes you better at talking to your patients about it and having a thorough understanding. So,
right.
Yeah, love it. Buddy, thank you so much for joining us today. This was a lot of fun.
Oh, it was fun. You guys are great, and I wish you guys the most success because you're getting information that's going to help the practitioners and the patients out there. So you guys are doing good work.
So we got to give home play, Doc. So like Nick was saying earlier, we typically will give our listeners a little bit of homework to do. Is there anything you can think just right off the bat that maybe they could take with them today based off the education or the awareness we gave them to maybe get them started in the right direction with something with their health?
Well, first of all, get tested. You don't know what's underneath the hood unless you get tested. So first of all, get tested to see where you're at. And
I think that's some good home play.
I mean, that's basically the big deal here. It really is. And then, you got to do the basics. So, a lot, people want to do all these other things. You got to eat right. You got to eat, as close to nature as possible. You got to move the body, you got to have some method of de-stressing. I mean, it's not rocket science, and that's going to improve your heart rate variability, and big one is the gut. The gut is like, most of the people that come in your office, I imagine with both you guys, it's underplayed. And the microbiome that's in our gut, a lot of people have dysbiosis out there. And if they have dysbiosis out there, they can't make all those nice, calming neurotransmitters. They're not going to make their GABA, their serotonin, and the molecules that the gut makes turns off the stress response. So, again, when we have sympathetic dominant people, you got to balance that gut out. And so they need, there's human strains out there now. There's all sorts of different probiotic strains. There's megaspore, sporobiotics, whatever it is that the person needs to improve that overall picture we're looking at. The gut is a big deal. They need to heal that gut. I don't know if that made any sense.
No, hey, buddy, that's great home play, man. Clean up the diet, make sure it's from nature, make sure you're moving. And then, like me and Nick talk, Hippocrates said it, all disease begins in the gut. If you got digestive issues, that's a good place to start with your health, to start getting some shifting, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's awesome. So it was so great having you on the call today, Dr. Mike. Inspiration for sure. Just hearing your many years of experience. And tell them about your books. Where can they access your books if they want to read a little bit more?
Well, those books are old. They don't need to. Those are books before I knew all the stuff that I know.
So don't read the books.
Don't read the book. If you want to, if you get on YouTube, they weren't supposed to be out there, but they're out there. There's a whole bunch of videos. They can punch in Dr. Mike Kessler and see a bunch of stuff that kind of slipped through the cracks and got in on YouTube somehow. But like I did that lecture years ago for Simon Yu, who wrote the book Curing the Incurables, right?
Very cool.
But
you're the first guy I've ever heard don't read my books.
Well, no, but it kind of goes off that.
I gotta write a new one.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of goes off that saying that we hear it all the time, right? It's the more you know, the more you realize you don't know crap. Like you probably just there in your career, right? Like you wrote those at a place in time, but you've learned so much since then that it's kind of like you got to rewrite them all now.
Yeah,
that's exactly right.
So I totally agree with you, man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, awesome. It's funny. Well, and that also shows the genius of a doctor in the sense that, there's constant innovation, there's constant growth, there's constant change. And you're riding the wave of that growth and change and putting your energy into technology and these really important tools that people need to know more about their health. And so.
Awesome. Mike, thank you, man. Appreciate you, brother. For sure, we could talk probably about this for like another hour, so we'll probably have to have you on another time and just focus maybe on one of the screens that we talked about today.
Yeah.
But again, man, many thanks, and yeah, man.
I want to thank you guys for having me on, and when the new one's out, we'll share that with you.
Awesome.
Put it in your lap. All right, you guys take care.
Have a good day.
Thank you, buddy. Be good.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please be sure to subscribe to the Dr. Dads and share with your family and friends. You can also follow and interact with Dr. Nick and Dr. David on Facebook and Instagram for a daily dose of inspiration and the latest in health and wellness. Be well.